Everyone, thank you for your patience. We'll call to order the State of Rhode Island Coastal Resources Management Council Planning and Procedures Subcommittee. Today is Tuesday, September 24, 2024. It is a continued date on this particular matter, but before I get to that, I will ask I would ask that the record reflect the subcommittee members that are present, as well as staff that is here with us this afternoon. I would ask for approval of the previous minutes of July 23rd, 2024. I know they have been disseminated in draft form, so if there's no corrections or if there are corrections, please state them. If not, I would entertain a motion to accept them.
So moved.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any discussion? Having none, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? Motion carries. Old business works in progress. Anything,
There
Mr.
is
Willis?
no old business nor works in progress at this time.
Okay, brings us to item number 4 on the agenda, advance notice of proposed rulemaking on a petition for promulgation of rules to review a review of staff recommendation in action in the matter of 2024-04-071 Quidnessett Country Club, petition for change to map of water type classification for North Kingston, parentheses, north, close parentheses. So Mr. Lofgren has had an opportunity to prepare a report, but I'm going to start with Director Willis to address us at this point.
Sure, I'm going to turn it over to staff. Both Bruce and Kevin Sloan have been integral in carrying the load and developing this staff report for us. Laura Miguel as well. Laura Dwyer had some work in it, and as did I. And I just want to recognize the effort that staff put into this work. There's quite a bit of analysis here. There's quite a bit of research, quite a bit of work that was done to get to this point. So I want to thank the staff for their time and effort on that. I'm going to turn it over to staff for their update and status on where we're at with the staff report and a briefing of the status report orally as well. So Bruce, Kevin.
Thank you, Director Willis. We'll start with a brief overview of the staff recommendation itself, then roll into any questions from members of subcommittee. The Quidnessett Country Club, or QCC, is petitioning the council to change the water type classification along an approximate 1,430-foot segment of shoreline from a type 1 to a type 2 classification. The shoreline area extends from the northeastern portion of the QCC's property line north to the northern property line of the property owned by the Pious Society of Missionaries. A water type classification change in this matter constitute a regulation change to the water type classification map for North Kingstown, found at section 650-RIRC-20-00-1, otherwise known as the Red Book, section 1.6 I sub 5. On August 17, 2023, CRMC enforcement staff received a complaint concerning an unauthorized riprap revetment at the QCC. Staff conducted a subsequent site inspection of the area on August 18, 2023, and found the unauthorized riprap revetment. On August 28, 2023, staff issued a cease and desist order number 23-0185 to the QCC for the unauthorized construction of the riprap revetment. On April 12, 2024, CRMC received a petition for the promulgation of rules petition submitted on behalf of the QCC. As stated above, the petition seeks a water type classification change from type 1 to type 2 waters for the water body adjacent to an approximate 1,430-foot segment of shoreline. In the cover letter submitted with the petition, counsel for the QCC indicated that, quote, if the water type change is approved, the QCC will evaluate all alternatives for shoreline protection allowed by the CRMC in type 2 waters and apply for Category B asset to address the pending enforcement action for the rock revetment along its northeast shoreline. Based on the evidence and facts presented herein, it is CRMC staff's opinion that the petition be declined for the following reasons. 1, the appropriateness of current type 1 water type classification. 2, inconsistency with the coastal planning mandated by the CRMC enabling legislation and state regulations contained within the Red Book. And three, potential negative impacts to public shoreline lateral access, coastal habitat, and marine resources. The CRMC staff recommends the Planning and Procedure Subcommittee deny the petition for the promulgation of rules and not initiate rulemaking, and that the Planning and Procedure Subcommittee adopt the staff's recommendations as grounds for the denial in this instance.
And Mr. Chair, I'd like to go over the petition, the history, status, and the process so far. The petition was submitted in accordance with Rhode Island General Laws 42-35-6 of the Rhode Island Administrative Procedures Act and CRMC's Management Procedures Section 1.4.9. On May 14, 2024, the Planning and Procedures Subcommittee voted to direct CRMC staff to issue an advance notice of proposed rulemaking under RI General Laws 42-35-2.5. The purpose of an advance notice of proposed rulemaking was to gather relevant information and solicit comments and recommendations from the public in response to the petition and the potential rulemaking action. The advance notice of proposed rulemaking itself is not an act of rulemaking by the CRMC. During the public comment period, CRMC received over 300 pages of comments, both in support and opposition to the petition. The CRMC also scheduled a Planning Procedures Subcommittee meeting to accept additional in-person public comments on the advance notice of rulemaking, proposed rulemaking, to aid in CRMC staff's investigation. This meeting was held on July 23rd, 2024, and over 30 individuals provided additional information both in support and opposition to the petition. The meeting concluded the informational gathering stage of the advance notice of proposed rulemaking, and CRMC staff began to complete its investigation and formulate a recommendation for the Planning and Procedure Subcommittee. Next, we analyzed the water type comparisons and shoreline characteristics of the petition and the site. The shoreline at issue has been designated as a type 1 water since the early 1980s. Staff compared the existing shoreline to type 1 in the Red Book. Section 1.2.1b of the Red Book categorizes type 1 conservation area shorelines as one or more of the following. Subsection A defines water areas that are within or adjacent to the boundaries of designated wildlife refuges and conservation areas. So the open space golf course portion of the QCC property is subject to an open space easement held by the town of North Kingstown that was recorded in the town's land evidence records in 1999. This easement area directly abuts tidal areas, shoreline features, and is located within the contiguous areas of the shoreline. The purpose of the open space easement is to, quote, benefit the town through the preservation of natural, recreational, and scenic values of the easement area. The easement area is also restricted from further development and any change of use other than recreational, agricultural, or conservation uses and developments for the aesthetics and recreational satisfaction of the residents and club members. The town of North Kingstown's comprehensive plans future land use map designates the majority of adjacent properties as open space, which is defined in the comprehensive plan as a designation that identifies public and private land identified for conservation and recreation use. Additionally, the shoreline is included within the U.S. Fish and Wildlife's Coastal Barrier Resource System. It's called the COBRA. The COBRA system is it's a system of protected coastal areas that were identified as important coastal barriers protecting properties on land from flood damage and providing protective habitat for aquatic plants and animals. The tidal areas associated with the petition are also located within the Rhode Island Department of Environmental Management's High Bank Shellfish Management Area. The management area is designated to better manage and promote sustainable shellfish resources. As such, the tidal areas are considered to be an important marine resource and are further managed through the current type 1 water classification. Based on this analysis, it's CRMC's opinion that the shoreline appears to be consistent with type 1 waters described in subsection A. Subsection B is defined as water areas that have retained natural habitat or maintained scenic values of unique or unusual significance. A type 1 shoreline implies that the tidal areas, shoreline features, and contiguous areas of the shoreline retain their natural habitats and were of high scenic value at the time of the designation of the 1980s. Although inland activities beyond the contiguous areas of the site may have changed since the water type was designated, the tidal areas, shoreline features, and contiguous areas remain consistent, aside from natural coastal processes and recent unauthorized activity. Additionally, the open space easement is in place to in part maintain scenic values of the contiguous areas immediately adjacent to the shoreline of the QCC property. Based on this analysis, it's CRMC staff's opinion that the shoreline also appears to be consistent with type 1 water description of subsection B. Subsection C, water areas that are particularly unsuitable for structures due to their exposure to severe wave action, flooding, and erosion. The majority of the shoreline associated with the petition is comprised of a coastal bluff and rocky shoreline. As evidenced in the petition and in CRMC shoreline change maps, the shoreline is subject to severe wave action and has experienced erosion. The shoreline areas and contiguous areas located within the COPRA designation are prohibited from federal funding and financial assistance, including flood insurance for new construction. Federal law stresses the importance of these areas for flood and habitat protection and disincentivizes new structural development. Thus, the shoreline area is particularly unsuitable for structures due to the area's exposure to severe wave action and erosion. Based on this analysis, it's CRMC staff's opinion that the shoreline also appears to be consistent with type 1 water designation for subsection. Staff also compared the petition and the shoreline to the type 2 designation within the Red Book. The type 2 designation within the Red Book is in section 1.2.1c, type 2 low intensity use. And this is quote, this category includes waters in the areas with high scenic value that support low intensity, recreational, and residential uses. These waters include seasonal mooring areas where good water quality and fish and wildlife habitat are maintained. The tidal areas, shoreline features, and contiguous areas of the shoreline associated with the petition are identified as high scenic value and support low intensity recreational uses. However, there are no residential structures within the contiguous area of the shoreline, as opposed to other type 2 waters in adjacent neighborhoods of Mount View and Potawatomi that contain, both those neighborhoods contain medium to high density residential structures in the contiguous areas of the shoreline. And they also have large segments of part of shorelines that predate CRMC and its regulations. The tidal areas associated with the petition do not have any seasonal mooring areas, residential or commercial docks. Therefore, staff opines that the waters and shoreline subject to the petition are properly classified as type 1 and not type 2. And we also provided a land use analysis that I'd like to go over as well. There are 3 lots that are adjacent to the shoreline associated with the petition. Lot 1 is owned by the Pious Society of Missionaries. This lot contains a total of 9 structures. Shoreline area associated with the petition is approximately 180 feet from the nearest commercial structure, approximately 275 feet from the nearest commercial apartment complex, and approximately 633 feet from any residential use. The North Kingstown Comprehensive Plan's future land use map designates this parcel as low density residential. Lot 2 is owned by Quidnessett Country Club Incorporated. The lot is approximately 71.5 acres in size. It's located in a rural residential zoning district. This lot contains a clubhouse, a commercial structure adjacent to the outdoor swimming pool, and an additional commercial structure. The remaining portions of the site contains golf course, coastal and freshwater wetlands, and associated open space. There are no residential units on lot 2. The shoreline area associated with Petition is approximately 1,000 feet from the nearest structure on lot 2. The open space golf course portion of the lot is subject to the open space easement held by the town of North Kingstown. Therefore, the open space portion of the lot nearest the adjacent shoreline is restricted for further development, and any change of use other than recreational, agricultural, or conservation uses. The North Kingstown Comprehensive Plan's future land use map designates this parcel as open space and protected land. Lot 3 is owned by Bayview Real Property LLC. The lot is approximately 19.8 acres in size and is located in a rural residential zoning district. This lot contains a nursing home. The shoreline associated with the petition is approximately 250 feet from the nearest structure on lot 3. The North Kingstown Comprehensive Plan's future land use map designates lot 3 as open space. The condominiums on site are located on an adjacent lot and are privately owned. The shoreline area associated with the petition is approximately 1,469 feet from the nearest condominium unit. The condominium portion of the site is designated as low density residential. Based on CRMC staff's land use analysis, the underlying zoning and proximity to the petition shoreline, CRMC disagrees with the petition's analysis that the associated land uses are high density and medium density residential.
Now we're going to have a brief discussion on the relationship between the water type classifications, the shoreline characteristics themselves, and that there is a geographic limitation as far as how far inland or upland activities can occur that would influence this relationship between the shoreline characteristics and the water sites uses and qualities. So in this, staff considered the language contained in Red Book section 1.2.1a, b, and c when analyzing the land uses at the shoreline in question. Section 1.2.1 clearly establishes geographic limitations as to where mainland activities occur and at what point they may be considered characteristics of the shoreline, which influence the water type classification designates. The first section of section 1.2.1a states, quote, 6 categories of waters defined in this program are directly linked to the characteristics of the shoreline, since the activities on the adjacent mainland are the primary determinant of the uses and qualities of any specific water site. The sentence read together with the examples given in the remainder of 1.2.1a clearly demonstrate that the link between the water type classifications and shoreline characteristics must be immediate, and as activities occur farther inland beyond the contiguous area, the link between water type classifications and the shoreline uses diminish. Additionally, all municipal comprehensive plans and their subsequent updates and revisions are required to be consistent with the Rhode Island Coastal Resources Management Plan, policies, and regulations, which include the water type classification system. Based on the CRMC's coastal jurisdictions, the 200-foot contiguous area is the geographical extent to which the water type classifications influence mainland uses. The Rhode Island CRMP differentiates between tidal waters, shoreline features, and contiguous areas separately from inland of the shoreline and contiguous areas via different standards and levels of jurisdiction. Therefore, it is clear that the Rhode Island CRMP considers the 200-foot contiguous area as the upland inland extent of regulated activities where water type classifications impact the shoreline uses. Areas beyond that line are considered inland activities. The CRMP goes on to give clear examples of this limiting geographic link between the shoreline and an adjacent water site. Again, in section 1.2.1a, for example, type 1 waters abut natural undisturbed shorelines, but do not allow for shoreline dependent uses like residential docks and dredge activities. CRMP clearly limits type 1 waters to shorelines of limited development with an intent to protect both coastal resources, uses, and qualities, while limiting coastal development that could threaten the objectives of the water classification. In contrast, type 2 waters are adjacent to shorelines characterized by residential areas with residential docks Thus, type 2 water type classifications facilitate low intensity recreational water usage. Therefore, based on the plain language of section 1.2.1a, any shoreline characteristics alleged to define a water type classification designation must have actually exuded an influence on the water site's uses and qualities and be within reasonable proximity to the water site. And now we'll discuss the water type classifications as a long-range planning tool in the context of CRMC's enabling legislation. Water type classification system is a long-range coastal planning and development tool, which furthers the purpose and intent of the CRMC as a regulatory body, as provided by the General Assembly via the agency's enabling legislation. The General Assembly states that Rhode Island General Laws Section 46-23-1 sub A sub 1 that providing adequate resources or resource planning is essential for the control and regulation of the state's natural environment. Additionally, quote, the unplanned and poorly planned development of Rhode Island coastal resources has already damaged or destroyed or has the potential of damaging or destroying the state's coastal resources. As such, the CRMC is charged with implementing, quote, comprehensive and coordinated long-range planning and management for Rhode Island's coastal regions for the preservation and restoration of ecological systems rather than site-specific conditions. As explained in the staff recommendation, the water type classification system is a comprehensive long-range planning and management tool that is intended to be consistent both geographically and temporally to allow for proper regulation of state coastal systems. The water type classification system achieves this long-range planning objective by creating a balanced relationship between shoreline development and mainland activities and a water site's uses and qualities to effectively manage future coastal development and coastal systems. In essence, the water type classifications seek to bring a cohesiveness to coastal planning and management by linking the shoreline development to water site uses and qualities. Once a water type was established, that water type began to influence the adjacent shoreline characteristics with the intent to maintain balance between the shoreline and water site uses and qualities. Said another way, the link between water type classifications and shoreline characteristics still exists. Only now the water type also influences how the shoreline may be developed in the future. This shift towards a balanced relationship, is evidenced through section 1.2.1 via the limitations on adjacent shorelines, shoreline development and water uses. There's also evidence elsewhere through the water type matrices, which prohibits certain activities from occurring on shorelines that are adjacent to certain water types. Following this rationale, to suggest that shoreline characteristics have changed to the point where there is no longer a balanced relationship between the shoreline characteristics / mainland activities and the water type classification is to state that a party has altered the shoreline's characteristics in violation of the Rhode Island CRMP's water type classification rules and regulations.
Next, we'd like to discuss shoreline analysis and consistency. And for this section, CRMC staff completed an analysis of the shoreline in the areas around the petitioned area. The shoreline traveling north from Cat Pasture Point, North Kingstown, to the southwestern side of East Greenwich Cove in East Greenwich is predominantly designated as type 1 waters. This segment of shoreline is approximately 14 miles long. Of the 14 miles of shoreline, approximately 12.44 or 89% of the shoreline is classified as type 1. The remaining 1.5 miles or 11% of the shoreline is designated as type 2. The areas designated as type 2 waters are the shorelines adjacent to high-density residential neighborhoods of Mount View in North Kingstown and Potawatomi and Warwick. Both neighborhoods were subdivided prior to 1950 and were largely built out by 1970. The residential structures along the shoreline are built on 5,000 to 10,000 square foot lots and are located within 100 feet of the coastal feature. In addition, the shoreline of these residential areas is largely armored with structural shoreline protection, including riprap revetments and concrete seawalls. Much of this development occurred prior to 1970, and these structures and associated shoreline protections predate CRMC and the Red Book regulations. CRMC classified water types along the entirety of the shoreline in the 1980s to reflect pre-existing land uses and shoreline types. As such, CRMC correctly designated Type 2 waters in these areas. The remaining 89% of the study area was designated as Type 1 waters to reflect the area of low-density residential uses, open space and conservation areas, and intact natural shorelines. Since the 1980s, shoreline areas and waterways designated as Type 1 in the study area remain relatively unchanged, as do the associated upland uses immediately adjacent to the coastal features. CRMC staff opined that the petition to reclassify approximately a quarter-mile segment of shoreline could be determined to be inconsistent with the larger area of consistent shoreline. Although there are other areas of Type 1 shorelines in the study area, the Mount View and Potawatomi shorelines have been structurally developed and are adjacent to the high-density residential neighborhoods. The petition shoreline is not consistent with the other segments of the Type 2 waters in the study area and would further fragment a larger area of consistent shoreline. The next item we'd like to discuss is impacts to shoreline lateral access. In 2012, the QCC proposed a cantilever steel sheet pile wall approximately 25 feet inland from the coastal feature. The CRMC staff at the time determined that this structure would eventually function as shoreline protection facility as erosion reached the face of the wall. In this application, CRMC staff determined that once the structure was exposed to erosion, quote, loss of coastal beach can be expected to impact natural functions and values of the beaches, including fish and wildlife habitat and associated recreational uses, including lateral shoreline access. CRMC staff continues to share the same concerns. Sediment eroded from the bluff provides the sediment source responsible for the creation, preservation, and continued existence of the coastal beach along the shoreline. Longshore currents in this area of Narragansett Bay result in longshore drift of sediment from north to south, parallel to the shoreline. If structural shoreline protection is authorized along the eroding coastal bluff, the existing coastal beach south to the mouth of Tibbetts Creek may become sediment starved, and erosion may accelerate. Therefore, lateral access may also be lost along a larger segment of shoreline beyond the area of proposed reclassification. The CRMC beach SAMP guidance states that, quote, hardening of shoreline can create barriers to public access along lateral access ways as erosion takes place, and that structural shoreline protection measures can have a broad range of negative impacts on adjacent beaches and properties, on the natural environment, and on shoreline public access. The next section deals with coastal habitat and possible effects. CRMC staff have similar concerns regarding impacts to coastal habitat. A coastal wetland and salt marsh exists at the mouth of Tibbetts Creek, immediately south of the petition shoreline area. Coastal wetlands and tidal marshes are one of the most susceptible ecosystems to climate change and sea level rise. To respond to sea level rise, tidal marshes must either retreat or naturally build elevation through accumulation of sediment. In the case of the coastal wetlands and tidal marshes near Tibbetts Creek, upland migration is limited due to the existing Gulf corridors, and elevation gain through sedimentation transportation is dependent on the natural erosion of the coastal bluff and longshore drift of sediment from the north. If this sediment source is reduced, the coastal marsh will not build up elevation at the same rate to compensate for the effects of sea level rise. Therefore, the long-term resiliency of the coastal marsh will be reduced and habitat loss may accelerate. This coastal wetland and tidal marsh may also be an area of particular concern, as the state endangered and protected diamondback turtle has been documented in the area. The diamondback terrapin thrives in brackish water and salt marsh habitat. And the next section is long-range planning and other considerations. When considering a policy decision such as this, It's important to consider the interrelatedness of decisions and future possibilities. In section 1.1.5A, the Rhode Island Coastal Resource Management Program identifies activities prohibited and regulated through scent applications in each type of water classification. The primary difference between a type 1, type 2 designation is the ability to apply for it. It's the ability to apply for an ascent for mooring areas, marinas, launching ramps, residential docks, structural shoreline protection, energy-related activities, maintenance dredging, open water dredged material disposal, municipal sewer treatment facilities, and construction of roads. These activities are prohibited in type 1, but may be applied for in type 2.
Based on the evidence and facts presented in the petition, information provided during the advance notice of rulemaking, and information gathered by CRMC staff recommends again that the Planning and Procedure Subcommittee deny the petition for promulgation of rules and not initiate rulemaking. The Planning and Procedure Subcommittee adopt the staff's recommendations as grounds for the denial.
Okay. I just had a couple questions, and you put a lot of data in the two presentations. I'm not sure if you covered it, so I'm just gonna ask you again. Do you know what year the golf course was created?
I believe it was sometime in the 50s or 60s, but I don't have the exact year.
1954.
All right. And I think you said in the 80s is when the water type was classified, is that correct?
Correct, yes, it was from the mid to late 70s to the early 80s. It wasn't all done at once, it was done over time.
Do we know when this particular area was designated? Do you have that?
I can answer that, Mr. Chair.
Okay.
So in the program that the federal government approved in the later 1970s, this area was designated as conservation areas. And then in the early 80s, when the agency actually put perimeters on what those shorelines are, meaning between this point and that point, is when we know the boundaries of this particular shoreline is type 1. But it's always been designated as type 1 conservation waters from the very beginning.
What year were the condominiums built? Do you know?
I think it was 2001, but not 100% sure.
I believe another set in the late 90s.
My understanding, and I just want to confirm, is they were built after the water type designation, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Any questions from council members?
Yes,
Done?
it was a good presentation. And I was particularly interested in the climate change discussion, but the last piece that you put together was one of the questions I had, the impact of going from 1 to 2, and what you have stated seems to be considerable change, docks and moorings and that whole bit. So, and the effects of climate change, has there been any effect yet there? And the land, does the land come down slowly, or is it an abrupt island, if you will, cliff type thing that erodes quickly? What's the reason for what is proposed? I'm looking at water coming up and attacking the shoreline, and I think what you said was that that may in fact benefit the habitat and the species and that whole naturalization of the area. Is that correct?
Correct, yeah, so there are some images that were provided in the petition. So that there are elements of the shoreline issue where it does appear to be a relatively abrupt, sand wall more or less, and then there's
So as
beach and shoreline.
So as it rises, that's going to erode.
Exactly, but that erosion also is extremely valuable in terms of ecological systems and sediment transport, as my colleague, Mr. Lockridge said.
There's a lot to take in, even though
Exactly, yeah.
hearing the spoken word changes a little bit. Yeah, okay, I think that's probably it. The only other question I would have is relative to what's been done already. Has that done anything to impact, the type 1 type features?
The unauthorized revetment,
Yes.
to that, I can't necessarily speak. I can say that it's being addressed through a separate enforcement matter at this time.
Yeah. And that would be subject to removal, I guess. Again,
Yes, yeah, separate.
probably would be, or not. Depends on the impact, I would expect.
Yeah, this is actually a separate matter
All right,
that is not connected at all to the enforcement action, which is ongoing.
yeah, okay, thanks. I'm good.
Any
Mr. Chair.
questions? Yes, Ms. Reynolds.
At the last meeting that we had, Jim Boyd was here, a long-term employee of CRMC. And he testified that there were other alternatives that could be employed, such as non-structural shoreline protection and redesigning the configuration of the golf course. That could be options that the course could apply. I understand there are serious implications of climate change that we're all facing. Does current staff agree that there are potentially other measures that could be investigated before we look at changing the water type?
Sure, and I believe it's section 1.2.1B, which discusses type 1 waters. It actually does provide for certain aspects of shoreline protection. However, there is an extremely narrow focus where you would have to use materials that are native to the site itself. You can bring in foreign material, for example. So there are options that could be considered as opposed to changing the water type itself.
Okay, thank you.
Just to follow up on that would, we allow or we require plantings in a lot of areas to preserve the
Yes.
erosion. Is that the kind of thing you're thinking about?
I couldn't speak directly to that. That's not
Yeah.
my sphere of expertise at
Okay.
the agency.
But I guess the answer of the question was that there are other methods that we require.
Right.
Right. Any other questions? Anything else from Bruce or Kevin? All right. Attorney Savenker, we have had an opportunity to allow staff to report on their report and give them an opportunity to answer questions from the council members. At this point, I am inclined to afford you a continuance to prepare and present at another hearing your case. For the record, you have not had an opportunity on behalf of the applicant to come forward and make a presentation as it relates to the application. At our last hearing, it was a public opportunity to come in and obtain public comment, pro and con. And we allowed staff an opportunity to utilize that material and prepare the report, which they've discussed here tonight. And to afford you your due process and that of your client, I'm inclined to allow you an opportunity to now prepare to present at a later date your case for your application, utilizing the material that you may have gleaned here tonight from the staff, if that is your desire.
Thank you, Chair Koya. That is our desire, to have an opportunity to make a presentation of our petition through witnesses. I anticipate 3 or 4 witnesses, and to address some of the background leading up to the petition. I heard this afternoon, Ms. Reynolds asking about alternatives. Mr. Gomez asked about that. We have a long history of trying out alternatives that I would like to present to this subcommittee, among other issues I'd like to put before you. And as you've mentioned, there's been an extensive amount of public comment. We've made a presentation at the town level. We just haven't had an opportunity to do so at the state level. So I would appreciate that greatly. And I would anticipate that it would take a couple of hours to get through presenting the witnesses and then answering questions of the subcommittee.
Okay. You wanna lead?
Well, this petition is brought pursuant to 42-35-6 and section 1.4.9 of the management procedures for the agency. Under section 42-35-2.5, under advance notice of proposed rules making, gathering information and soliciting comments, that's been done. This can be done by a subcommittee, that's been done. But under section 2.8B, any other information can be considered. So if that's what the subcommittee wants to do, it is in order on a statutory basis.
Thank you. So I would continue the matter. I don't have a date that I can state right now. I would rely on staff to secure the room, the time, and whatever we need to conduct the proper hearing, and then notify you of that in ample time.
Yes, I know that you have 2 potential meeting dates in October, October 8th and the 22nd. I just wanted to indicate that one of the witnesses wouldn't be available, but that would be pretty quick anyway. But the 22nd looks good if there's an opening for the subcommittee.
Okay.
You need to make a motion
To
to continue, yes.
All right, and with that said, then I would entertain a motion then to continue the matter as indicated to a future date to allow the applicant their opportunity to make their presentation and incorporate my statements that I've made earlier here this evening and that of Attorney Cervenka. Do I hear that in the form of a motion?
So moved.
Motion made by Ms. Reynolds. Is there a second? Seconded by Mr. Gomez. I'll poll the council. Mr. Gomez?
Aye.
Mr. Gagnon?
Aye.
Ms. Reynolds?
Aye.
I too, Raymond Coy, vote aye. So the matter will be continued.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Sure.
Well, any other business to come before us? I'm following my agenda. Any other business? Any new business?
There's
Staff reports?
no staff.
Entertain a motion to adjourn then.
So moved.
Motion made and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, say aye.
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 Anyone opposed? All right, meeting is adjourned. Thank you.